Yo, what's good everyone? Infamous Legacy here with another Marvel's Avengers gear guide video. In this gear guide video, I'll be taking a look at Thor and his Discordant gear set. And with this particular Discordant gear set for Thor, a lot of his gear pieces actually come from the Discordant Sound Elite raid. And the reason being is because of the perks. So let's get to it and let's go ahead and get this started and show you guys what gear pieces that you guys really need to aim for when you're farming gear pieces from the Discordant gear set. Before I go into breaking down the gear pieces in the Discordant gear set for Thor, let me go ahead and showcase to you guys artifacts that you also want to probably aim for with your Thor builds. So the first one I have here is a range artifact. It's a Norn Stone of the Bulwark, however, it comes with the Pinpoint Vibranium payload. So with artifacts with the Pinpoint Vibranium payload, you want to make sure you get it with Proficiency, Valor, and Precision. So 36.6 chance that a ranged critical attack will activate a Vibranium payload. So that will, for example, cause a status effect of Vibranium on the enemy target. So this is good for a range hero. And then if you're going with, let's say, a melee build with Thor, the Norn Stone of the Vanguard with a lethal Vibranium Conduit and the Thoughtless Vibranium payload is really good. And with all these particular perks that you guys see right here, it is all RNG based, so when you are farming for these minor artifacts through the regular raid, the Corrupted Vibranium event, or even the Elite raid, the perks sometimes might be different from what you see here. It might take you a couple attempts to exactly get the same perks and the better stats, so keep that in mind. But going back to the melee artifact with the Thoughtless Vibranium payload and the Lethal Vibranium Conduit, this is really good because it also helps you with the Sonic Conduit buff. And if you guys want more information about the Sonic Conduit buff, I will leave a link in the description regarding the Sonic Conduit buff and all that information so you guys can check out. So make sure you check out that link. So these are some artifacts, and you can also get Thoughtless Vibranium payload artifacts from the Mega Hive. So if you also want to try that out, the Mega Hive, after you complete it, there is a chance you might be able to get Thoughtless Vibranium payloads from the legendary minor artifacts from the Mega Hive. Now moving on to the gear pieces. So with Thor, like I mentioned, all these gear pieces that I was able to obtain are from the Elite Discordant Sound raid. The regular raid will have different perks, so those perks are not as useful as the Elite version of this gear set. So let's go ahead to the heroic slot first. So a couple options with the heroic slot. So you can either get this with Warrior's Fury Breaker and Granting Melee Breaker. So Granting Melee Breaker, while you have that Sonic Conduit buff being sent, the melee damage of the sender, for example yourself, is increased by 30%. So when you're sending that Sonic Conduit, your melee damage is increased by 30%. So this is really good for a melee Thor build. Another thing I'll probably recommend is related to your Assault Heroic ability. So Warrior's Fury Breaker with Receiving Assault Breaker. So when you're receiving the Sonic Conduit, your Assault Heroic damage is increased by 35%, which is God Blast. So this is really good for your Assault Heroic ability, and this is good for your melee attacks. The best thing to make sure you try and aim for when it comes to a heroic piece from the Elite Discordant Sound raid, make sure it at least has Warrior Fury Breaker, because every time you activate your support heroic ability, on top of the whatever buff you're getting from using it, you're also going to get 15% increased damage from Warrior's Fury. So these heroic pieces are pretty good to use on Thor, and depending on what kind of build you're going for, it might actually be useful to you. Moving on to the defensive piece. So whether it's a melee build or a range build, you guys want to make sure you go with certain stats catering to that type of build. For example, here is a range type piece with Precision, Valor, and Resilience. It comes with Reverberation Breaker, so we already know what that is. It inflicts 25% additional damage to enemies inflicted by the Vibranium status effect, and that can also come with from your Vibranium payload. And then it comes with Odin Force Breaker. So Odin Force Breaker is a key with a couple of gear pieces that you guys are about to see in this gear set. And again, only available through the Elite raid. 18% increased damage while Odin Force is active. So you guys already know when you're holding that right trigger down, you activate Odin Force. So Odin Force is your intrinsic ability. So this is a piece that I actually use on my range build, and I will leave a link in the description to my incredible godly Thor range build that you guys should check out, because that build actually still does some crazy damage till this day. So I'll make sure I leave a link in the description, and I use a lot of gear pieces from the Discordant gear set in that build too. Going back to the defensive slot, so if you're going with the melee build, obviously Might, Resilience, and Valor will help with the melee build with the exact same perks. And then I forgot to mention, with the heroic slot, you guys can actually get different stats on this as well. Sometimes it can be Might Valor, Precision Might and Valor for an all-around build. So different stats can roll on all these gear pieces. Moving on to the range piece. So the range piece is actually pretty interesting because there are a couple options here. We'll start off with the best option to farm for. So I have the range piece with Valor, Might, and Resilience right here with Warrior's Fury Breaker. So this actually stacks with your heroic piece right here. And then the range and melee piece from the Discordant gear set can only come with Sonic and Vibranium status effect. So keep that in mind. And then on this piece, I have the third perk, 26% increased damage for any melee attack using your hammer. So this is really good for a melee Thor build. The only thing I will probably recommend that you guys try and aim for from the Elite Raid is make sure you can get this piece with the Warrior's Fury Breaker and then the Vibranium status effect, because you're already going to be doing a cold status effect with your, electricity attacks and everything like that. So when you're activating Odin Force, you're applying shock status. So that's your cold status effect. And when you combine it with the Vibranium status effect, you're going to create battery damage, which kind of like doubles your damage. So what you're going to do is, with this particular gear piece, instead of the third perk, hopefully you're lucky, go with the Thoughtless buff. So a Thoughtless buff can also come as a third perk on this particular gear piece. So if you're able to get Warrior's Fury Breaker with a Thoughtless buff, that's probably the best range piece you can get from the Discordant Sound Elite Raid, just because the Thoughtless buff will activate your damage buff. Now, if we're talking about a range piece to aim for, like with the ranged particular build, you probably want to go for something like this. I don't actually use this on my range build, so when you do check out my range build video for Thor, you will see I use something different. But for someone who is new to the game and that's just getting, gear pieces for their character, every range hero or every hero actually can get this type of range piece. Sonic status on the range attack, and then a pinpoint Vibranium payload. So this is automatic battery effect because you have a cold and warm status effect on this gear piece. And I got this with Might, Precision, and Valor. You guys can actually get this gear piece from the regular raid, the Elite Raid, or even the Corrupted Vibranium event. But at the end of the day, even if you're not planning to make a melee build, I would recommend getting this gear piece, but with Thoughtless buff as the last perk. Now the last piece. So this can come with Might and Valor, Precision and Valor. The key thing to make sure you get on this is Lethal Vibranium Conduit, because this also has the same conduit or same kind of perk as that Nornstone of the Vanguard I showed you guys with the Sonic Conduit buff. And then Vibranium status effect is also pretty good on this. Sonic is alright, but the Vibranium status effect, you guys will be able to do more damage with this status effect combined with your shock status. But get it with Odin Force Breaker. Odin Force Breaker, another perk where it increases your damage while Odin Force is active, and this can stack with your defensive slot. So I actually use this defensive piece and melee piece on my ranged Thor build. And again, this only comes from the Elite Raid. If you're going with the melee build, light combo finishers and signature attacks is really good. Sometimes you might also run into power attacks, but if you are using a Thor melee build, light combo finishers and signature attacks are probably the best way to go. But Odin Force Breaker is a key perk that you want to make sure you can get on this with the proper stats depending on your build. So now that I've explained all the gear pieces from the Discord gear set for Thor, exclusively available from the Elite Raid, the best gear piece to probably aim for first is a defensive slot. Reverberation Breaker with Odin Force Breaker, really good for DPSing. Second piece, even though if you're not a fan of a melee build but eventually want to make a melee build, this one right here, excluding the third perk you want to make sure you can get is Faultless Buff. So that would be the second one to get. The third piece to aim for would be the melee piece with whatever stats you're trying to get for your build, but with Odin Force Breaker, because that is something that can stack with your defensive slot. And then last, you can get the heroic slot, because there are other heroic slots that you guys can use in the game that might be more useful to you when it comes to building your hero. And then we also spoke about the artifacts. So if you guys do have any questions about this entire gear guide video on Thor's Discord gear set, let me know. And there we go. I hope you guys enjoyed this gear guide video on Thor's Discord gear set. If you guys want to see more content like this, show your support by hitting that like and subscribe button. Until next time, I'm out. You guys take care. Peace.